He is the king of country music, not just a country singer. Some of the best country songs ever recorded have George Strait's voice on them. His songs have touched the lives of millions of people over the course of more than 40 years, from Amarillo by Morning to Check Yes or No. Things have changed, though. Something that no one was ready for. People who are fans recently heard something that broke their hearts and left them confused and shocked. George Strait has always been known for being calm and peaceful. He never looked for trouble or news. But this new story about him has gone popular on the internet. It's being talked about by everyone, but no one seems to know the answer. What could happen to a man who couldn't be hurt? How could someone who is so strong and can't be stopped be at the center of something so bad? Early life and work. His birthday is May 18, 1952, and he was born in Pottet, Texas, a small town. He grew up in Frio County, in the nearby town of Pearl, where things were direct, simple, and stuck to custom. John Byron Strait, Sr., was his dad's math teacher in junior high school. But after school was over, they spent the weekends at their family's huge 20,000-acre cow ranch near Big Wells, Texas. George's childhood was affected by the land. He learned early on how important it is to work hard by helping out on the ranch, but life wasn't always easy. When George's parents split up, he was in the 4th grade. His mother left, and his sister Pensy went with her. That meant that George and his bigger brother John Buddy Jr. had to be raised by their dad. From school to the land and back again, the three of them worked together to handle everything. The first time George played music was when he was a young kid. The Stoics, a rock and roll house band from Pearl High School, were his band. George was caught up in the British invasion, as were most teens in the 1960s. He loved the Beatles and other rock bands of that time very much. People really liked the Beatles. George once said, "I listened to them a lot." And that whole group of popular bands at the time. But even though rock music first interested him, George found his true calling in country music in the end. Over time, his choice changed. Folk stars from the country music scene like Hank Thompson, Lefty Friel, Merle Haggard, George Jones, and Hank Williams became more important to him. He also liked Bob Wills and even copied the smooth, polished way Frank Sinatra sang. Surprisingly, George didn't spend all of his time listening to country music, like some might think. Instead, he would rather listen to news shows and reports for farmers. He heard country music, but not on the radio. He heard it at live shows. Almost every town in Texas at the time had live country music, and George went to all of them. In the beginning, it all began on Texas back roads, in the hours between school and ranch work and in the nights at the nearby music venues. This quiet, hard-working kid from Pearl would grow up to be the king of the country. No one knew that at the time. However, George Strait was unique even in the beginning. The daily life of George Strait. There has been just as much drama and sometimes tragedy in George Strait's life off the stage as there was in his work as a singer. He and his high school sweetheart, Norma, were excited to get married in a big church. For this reason, they sneaked into Mexico and walked down the aisle on tiptoe in December 1971. In October of the next year, they had their first child, Jennifer. After 3 years, in 1981, their son George Harvey Strait Jr., who they just call Bubba, was born. In 1986, something terrible happened. Jennifer, who was 13 years old, died in a car accident outside of San Marcos on June 25. The Strait family was deeply saddened by the loss, and George's views on privacy and fame will never be the same. To honor their daughter in a good way, they started the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation. It quietly sends donations to children's charities in San Antonio, serving as a live memorial to their daughter. After finishing from Texas A&M NDM, Bubba became old enough to share his dad's love of living the cowboy life. He now works as a team roper in professional rodeos. In 2006, George caught Bubba in the act at the Houston Livestock Show in rodeo. He quickly ran backstage and put on his own sold-out show that night. In 2009, George's older brother John Byron Strait, better known as Buddy Strait, died at the age of 58. This was another loss in the Straits family. George kept relying on his faith, his family, and the work ethic that he learned on the land. The fact that he has worked with Wrangler for a long time shows the same sense of loyalty. In 2010, he became a spokesperson for the Wrangler National Patriot Program. This program tries to help families of sick and injured U.S. soldiers and raise money and awareness for them. He said, "When they came to me with a way to help our veterans, I couldn't say no." You might also see him in ads for Tractor Supplies, which is another nod to his childhood in the country. The Strait family tree keeps getting bigger. Because of the birth of their son George Harvey Strait III in February 2012, Bubba and his wife Tamara are now known as the King of Country. Grandpa George proudly wears this title. Roping is still an interest of mine. The George Strait Team Roping Classic was held every year from 1983 to 2017. The best ropers in the game fought for bragging rights and big prizes, first in Kingsville and then at the San Antonio Rose Palace. George is not on a horse. He is in his San Antonio-based Gulfstream G450 with the tail number N518GS. That plane took him and Texas Governor Greg Abbott all over the state after Hurricane Harvey hit in 2017 to lead relief efforts in coastal towns that had been badly damaged. He stays busy in the hill country with his old friend Tom Cusk and with charity work. George helped to start the Vaqueros Del Mar Invitational Golf Tournament and Show, which takes place at their resort west of Bourne. Since 2012, the event has given more than $5 million to David Farid's Troops First Foundation, which helps families of wounded soldiers. The Texas Legislative Conference gave Strait the 2018 Texan of the Year award for all of his hard work. With his own sorrow, the thrill of the rodeo, and never-ending acts of kindness, George Strait shows that cowboy values like loyalty, persistence, and kindness go far beyond any #1 record. A fake news story, sexual abuse, and stalking claim. There was a strange and scary story going around on Facebook in 2018. Someone wrote that Emmy Lou Hayes, a woman, had said that George Strait was stalking and bothering her. The post quickly gained a lot of attention, and most fans were worried and confused because George Strait is usually very polite and quiet. But this story wasn't true. Snopes, a website that checks claims, looked into the claim in detail. They looked for proof that the woman existed and that George Strait had ever been involved with such claims. Snopes did a full investigation but could not find any proof of either the woman's presence or the claims. It turned out that the whole story was made up, a scam. A police record or court case was never filed against George Strait for this, and the rumor was not backed up by a reliable source. It was just a story that someone made up and then spread on the internet. When people hear these kinds of false stories, it hurts their reputations because they involve serious charges like stalking or harassment. During his long career, George Strait has kept a very clean record. Another thing that this false story showed was how quickly news can spread on social media. Most of his friends stuck by him because they knew who he is and how much he respects other people. In the end, this event was shown to be false. In other words, it was proven to be wrong. It's a great example of why you should check the facts before you share or believe a story on the internet, especially if it could hurt someone's image. If George Strait said Beyoncé's project was trash, then it must be true. Some Facebook jokes started going around a few years ago saying that George Strait had said Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter project was trash. Fans of both of these singers were shocked and even let down by this news. Beyoncé is a huge star all over the world, and George Strait is a legend in country music. So, the idea that Strait would say such mean things about Beyoncé in public caught on quickly. The thing is, it wasn't true. The website Saving Country Music, which is known for checking the accuracy of country music news, looked into where the quote came from. They learned that the whole account began as a funny Facebook page. That means it wasn't a real interview or comment, but something made up for fun or as a parody. George Strait has never said anything bad about Beyoncé or her work in an interview, on a recording, or from a trusted source. Strait has never said anything at all about Beyoncé in public. The meme was only wrong and harmful. When it comes to two big names in different music genres, this kind of false information can spread very quickly online. Fans often have strong reactions without checking to see if what they're reading is true, which can lead to drama and confusion that isn't needed. There is no sign that George Strait would say something like that about another artist. His success has been built on professionalism and respect. It's important to remember not to accept or share posts that go viral without first making sure they are true. In order to clear things up, George Strait never said that Beyoncé's project was trash. That is completely made up. Also, both artists should be praised for their work in their own types of songs. The fuss over Trump's train move. In 2024, at one of George Strait's big arena shows, there was a moment that some fans found interesting and that caused some debate on social media. While singing along, Strait made a quick arm tap dance move that some saw as a subtle nod to former President Donald Trump. Some of Trump's fans have even called this move the Trump train move. Because George Strait usually doesn't talk about politics in public during his shows or events, this small action caused a lot of debate. Taste of Country reported the news and printed the different opinions fans had about the act. Some saw it as a clear political message, while others thought it was just Strait's usual stage presence and had nothing to do with politics at all. George Strait himself didn't say anything about what happened. He neither denied nor confirmed that the dance move had a political meaning, and more importantly, he never made any public political support for the move. So, the whole idea that he was showing support for Trump was mostly just a guess. People who follow or watch celebrities often read into small actions or words that they do political meaning into them. This is especially true in today's very political world. However, since the subject hasn't said or done anything directly, these tries are just guesses. George Strait's success has been built around his music and shows, not on politics. That didn't change because of this. He probably did the arm-pumping move as part of his stage act and not to make a political point. So, even though some fans thought they saw a pro-Trump shout-out, there isn't much proof that George Strait was making a political comment. It's still an interesting theory, but it's not fact. Murder on Music Row caused a lot of fuss. George Strait and Alan Jackson sang "Murder on Music Row" together at the 1999 CMA Awards. The song was written by Larry Cordell and Larry Shell and is very rude. The words say that someone killed country music and left it on the street, and they blame Nashville's big record labels for focusing on pop sounds and ignoring traditional ones. Strait and Jackson also recorded the duet for Strait's 2000 Greatest Hits collection, Latest Greatest Straightest Hits. The song was played on the radio so much that it made it to the country charts, even though it was never released as a single. The song caused a huge stir in the country music world right away. People who like traditional music praised Strait and Jackson for bravely preserving fiddle and steel country music during a time when smooth production and crossover sounds were popular. But younger artists and people who work in the business felt like they were being picked on. Some reviewers said the performance was rude, but others said that styles change all the time and there's nothing wrong with combining country and pop styles. Saving Country Music wrote in 2023 that the duet brought together fans who felt like Nashville was moving too far in the direction of pop music. The fight is still going strong in this day and age of streaming. In 2024, when the song's 25th anniversary was being celebrated, music writers went back to the furor. A lot of people said that the same reasons are still important today, when country stars work with rappers. DJs who play EDM music and TikTok stars. People on social media still talk about Murder on Music Row when they think modern country music has moved too far away from sound and story. Strait and Jackson have both said they love traditional country music, but neither has said sorry for the song. The duet brought up a conflict that still exists in the business. In one corner are artists who are willing to try new things. In the other, conservatives are afraid of losing the roots of their country. That tug-of-war became a public song because of Murder on Music Row. Even now, more than 20 years later, the chorus is often played when people argue about whether schools should be old or new. Some people don't like that George doesn't write his own songs. One thing that people have long said about George Strait is that he doesn't write most of his own songs. Over the years, some fans and music reviewers have talked about this, saying that it makes them wonder how real his music is. After all, there is a lot of emphasis on artists writing songs these days, especially in the country and pop styles. This was talked about again in 2023, when Saving Country Music wrote about it again. One point is that Strait relies too much on other songwriters, which hurts the credibility of his own music. They don't think it's fair to call someone an honest speaker if the stories they're singing weren't really told by them. But there are a lot of people who protect the Straits on a different level. They say it doesn't matter who wrote the song as long as it's performed well. You can't miss Strait's voice, and her music tells stories in a calm but strong way. It takes a lot of skill for him to choose the right songs and make them come to life. Frank Sinatra, who is also known as one of the best entertainers of all time but didn't write most of his own songs, is often compared to him by his fans. Strait has never been one to talk a lot about the complaints. He thinks it's always been about picking the right song with the right message and then putting it across in a way that people can relate to. He has had more than 60 #1 songs, so it's hard to say that the formula hasn't worked. Okay, so it's true that George Strait hasn't written most of the songs he sings. That might not have been the point at all. How those songs make you feel is what matters, and Strait's record does that. That movie star look from the 2024 CMA Awards. A short camera cut of George Strait at the 2024 CMA Awards caused a lot more buzz than anyone thought it would. The cameras cut to Strait, who was sitting quietly in the crowd while she sang a high-energy country rap mix. He had a stone-cold look on his face. No smile, no cheers, just a blank look. That video went popular very quickly. Fans of social media spread a lot of conspiracy ideas on the web. Many people said Strait's face showed that he was disgusted by what was happening, which was exactly how real country fans felt. Soon after, memes popped up that made it look like classic country artists didn't like how the new sound mixed with other genres. Yahoo Entertainment found out about the fuss and put together the talk. Some fans said it was a protest that didn't make a sound, while others said he was just tired or lost in thought. Strait never said anything about it, so no one knows for sure what is true. In response to the reports, he didn't say anything. As always, he kept quiet and let the World Wide Web have its turn. The part of the show quickly became a cultural icon. Some people thought it was a funny take on the constant battle between old and new country music. For some, it was way over the top. In the end, being quiet doesn't always mean you hate someone. It's possible that you're not really interested or that you can see something else. To sum up, George Strait's poker face went viral, but it remains to be seen if it really did mean something. It shows how quickly one look on the face can turn into a full-on internet story, especially when that story involves a famous person from your country. Fans felt snubbed when George Strait didn't go to Texas. At least at first, George Strait fans were thrilled when he added more cities to his 2025 stadium tour. But one thing stood out when the list came out. Texas did not have a single wedding. That might not be a big deal for most writers. A lot of people looked at George Strait, the king of country music and a true Texan, with surprise. Texas fans didn't hold back. People were upset, confused, and even shocked on social media. How could he go all over the country and not visit his home state? That's where he made his name and where most of his fans live. The local news joined in too. It was called a snub in my San Antonio, which echoed how many Texans felt. The lack was felt deeply in a state that has always been at the heart of Strait's music and culture. Most people thought there would be at least one or two big shows in San Antonio, Houston, or Dallas. Strait has packed arenas in Texas for decades. And DT Stadium, which holds the record for the biggest indoor show in the U.S., is a place he knows very well. It was not made clear why Texas would be left out, which made things even more murky. Some people were still hoping that a show in Texas would be announced later. Some people thought it might have been a schedule issue, and some even joked that George might be saving Texas for something important. But since there was no confirmation, the anger remained. In the end, it wasn't a scandal, but it made people feel something. Strait's music is a source of pride for many Texas fans. So, skipping a stop in Texas on such a big tour seemed like missing the family gathering. Whether the choice was temporary or long-term, it made a lot of noise and showed how much Texans love George Strait. Concerns about the environment are raised by George Strait's private jet. George Strait doesn't have a very public life, but his private plane has caused some people to wonder about his lifestyle. A study from 2022 by Climate Jet said that the Strait's Gulfstream G450 plane put out about 423 tons of carbon dioxide in a single year. Just to give you an idea, that's more carbon pollution than 27 normal Americans would make in a whole year. This news made a lot of noise online, especially among people who care about the environment. The story was also covered by Yahoo News on celebrity net worth and lifestyle, which brought the carbon footprint of Strait's trips even more attention. It is important to note that George Strait has not responded to this attack in public. And for most famous people with long jobs and global fame, taking a private plane for comfort, privacy, and ease of scheduling is nothing out of the ordinary. In a time when climate change is becoming a bigger problem, it's getting harder and harder to ignore the environmental cost of these rich lives. Some fans came to Strait's defense by saying that many traveling acts use private planes to keep up with their busy schedules and stay safe. Others were upset and said that famous people should lead by example when it comes to reducing emissions or at least pay to reduce their carbon footprint. So far, the criticism hasn't been linked to any changes in how people travel across the Straits, and it's just one small voice in the larger conversation about how celebrities travel and their duty to the world. It was a good lesson, though, that even country stars like George Strait can be criticized by the public, especially when it comes to how their choices affect the world. The news that made fans jump. Fans were freaking out when country music star George Strait took a seat in the middle of a concert. The singer, who is 72 years old, is currently on tour with Chris Stapleton. But something strange happened at his first show in Philadelphia. George looked like he was having trouble and had to sit down during the show. Soon, a music video was posted on TikTok, and the person who did it added captions to it. George says his back hurt, so he won't be moving like he usually does. George had said that in a light-hearted and funny way, but fans were still worried. Many people wrote in the comments that they hoped George would get better quickly and that they hoped his back was okay.